that I wanted to show you. We've got a different group of materials right here, which I would call these terpenoids. And what they share in common is a feature. It's usually a fairly long carbon chain, and there will be a methyl group attached to a double bond. This compound really does not quite fit into this group, but it does have the very long carbon chain, so I put it in there as well. Fucoxanthin is actually, we've actually seen this before. It's actually a pigment that's isolated from fucus. And squalene, although it's not immediately recognized as what I would call a terpenoid. It's actually is derived from those kinds of molecules. Again, you can see here's the methyl group and the carbon atoms. There's another methyl group here. Here you see it in curacin A. This particular molecule is actually a steroid, but I still classify it in the same group of compounds. So let me tell you about these compounds. Discodermalide is actually in phase 1 right now for solid tumors, anti-cancer for solid tumors. Curacin is also an anti-cancer agent, potential anti-cancer agent. There's a lot of interest in it. It's a pretty new compound. Right now it's in advanced preclinical work, but it looks very, very good, and I believe that they will be filing to actually do phase 1 trials with that. One compound that's kind of disappointing is the one that you see down in the lower left-hand side of the screen, which is called manoalide, M-A-N-O-A-L-I-D-E. This was a compound that I think may have gotten as far as phase 3, but it failed. It was a very potent, it seemed to be a very potent anti-inflammatory agent, but unfortunately, as I said, it just didn't clear the hurdles. There's another compound here, right over here, squalene. The source for this particular compound is actually, this steroid is actually dogfish or sharks, and you'll find it in the liver of these animals. But this compound has been looked at as an anti-cancer agent. There have been trials done with that. But one interesting thing, there's been a new trial that was done that has just been started recently on age-related macular degeneration. So this is actually, that's a condition, of course, that would lead to blindness ultimately. But this compound may be effective in treating that as well. So it's undergoing some trials. Now, I haven't told you about anything yet, any of these compounds that are actually on the market. And if you read a paper that I read that was actually published in 2000, and I think it was 2004 or 2005, it basically says that none of these compounds, there are no marine-derived compounds that are actually being sold right now, that are actually approved by the FDA and or on the market. And that's no longer true, because I'm going to show you a couple that actually have made it to the market. This next one here is kind of interesting, this fucoxanthin, which is, as I mentioned before, is actually a pigment, and it's isolated from fucus, from the seaweed fucus that we talked about previously, and we did talk a little bit about fucoxanthin, but not its biological properties. What it seems to do, and it actually is available, people can buy it and people can use it, because it's what I guess you would probably describe as a nutraceutical. These are compounds that you sometimes see if you go into like a health food store, and you'll see various kinds of extracts and whatnot, and you don't really need to do very much. The FDA really doesn't involve itself too much with these compounds. You can't really put something in a bottle that's poisonous, because you don't want to start killing people. But if you put something in a bottle that doesn't do anything, after a while people are going to stop buying it. But what this thing seems to do, and I really haven't seen any what I would call controlled clinical trials with this, but they claim that it promotes weight loss. So people do take this kind of supplement when they're trying to lose weight. So that is one possible use for that. And it's sold under a variety of different trade names, but it's not really a compound of the type that I've been discussing previously. These two compounds have nothing in common structurally. They're just two unrelated things. One of them is called brevinol, and the other one is topsentin. And brevinol is what I would refer to as a cyclic, because there's a lot of rings here, polyether, all these oxygens in here. And we've seen actually this structures like this before. What brevinol does, or what it's actually used for, and I think, again, it may be a compound that didn't really have to go through, it may not have actually had to go through all the processes that a new drug would go through, because what it is, it's actually an anti-venom. And you might remember we talked some weeks ago about a particular kind of food poisoning that was called ciguatera food poisoning. There is actually a toxin that's produced called brevetoxin. And it turns out that brevinol, actually, which is produced by a dinoflagellate, if you give it to somebody who's been exposed to the brevetoxin, which can be very, very dangerous, could actually kill someone, that this actually counteracts the effects of the brevetoxin. There's another compound here, I think not in clinical trials yet, but this topsentin that you see here, this is also isolated from a sponge, and it's it seems to have anti-inflammatory properties. Okay, I've got two more slides I want to show you that have compounds on them, and I think both of these slides, I believe, actually have compounds, or at least one compound each, that is actually on the marketplace. So this is kind of a busy slide here. There's a lot of different chemical compounds. These particular compounds are all peptides, or what are known as depsipeptides. Peptides are, of course, strings of amino acids, and you'll see you have like a CONH, CH, CONH, CH. This is you have a string of amino acids. Now this is a cyclic compound, this cahalolide, but in this string, then you go to a COO. So instead of this amide or peptide linkage, you now have an ester linkage. So when we have those kinds of things, they're no longer referred to as peptides, but they're now called depsipeptides, DEPSI, indicating that they have at least some ester linkages in them. Here's another depsipeptide over here. But all these things have some peptide linkages in them. They have some kind of an amide linkage. This one maybe is a bit of a stretch. It is an amide, but I don't really know that we would call it a peptide. And then the one up here, which is called, these are called lingbiastatins, that also has that same cyclic peptide structure. Now, there's one really big peptide over here, and it's called ziconotide. And you'll notice it has a registered trademark next to it, PRIALT, Prial. This is a drug. This is actually a drug, something that your doctor could prescribe. So this is, God forbid you need this drug though, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a second now. So what we have here, the first one, the one in the upper left-hand side, the lingbiastatin, anti-cancer agent, potentially anti-cancer agent, derived from a cyanobacterium. This other compound down here, largazole, that you see right here, also from this is from a bacterium. This has anti-colon cancer properties, and it's preclinical right now, but the company that's working with it is expected to file for clinical trials, phase 1 clinical trials in the very near future. Aplanine, this compound right here, seems to be effective, at least in phase 1 and 2 clinical trials, against a particular kind of cancer called multiple myeloma, and it's actually isolated from an ascidian, And then, what are the other ones that I'm missing? This is an kahalalide is an anti-cancer compound, phase 2, and it's also being tested for, it seems to be effective in treating psoriasis as well. The compound that I mentioned before, priol, this very, very large peptide, is actually on the market, and it's isolated. It was originally isolated from a cone snail, so you know that the cone snail toxins, the conotoxins, are extremely toxic material. There's probably been some stuff that's been done to this to make it a little bit safer, but it's still it's administered in very, very low doses, and it's a non-opioid analgesic agent, and it's not. As I said, it comes from the cone snail, but it's something that's given to people who can't tolerate things like morphine, and this is not a non-addictive painkiller, but it is for treating chronic pain, and it is something that can be prescribed by a physician. Finally, last slide. And again, we're going to see these two compounds are very, very closely related to one another. Ectinacidin here, and this compound here called tribectedine. And what you'll notice is, I want to call your attention to this structure right in here. This is an unusual ring fusion. You've got a 6-membered ring with 2 nitrogens in it here that's fused in with another 6-membered ring. This is what we call a bridgehead right here. But these particular, and then there's a phenolic ring over here, a benzene ring with an OH. You've got the same partial structure over here, and then you also have over here a similar structure, a sulfur oxygen, C double bond O. You've got that same structure over here. Where the two compounds differ are here. Well, they're actually very, very closely related, because we don't really know what X2 is right over here. But ectinacidin and tribectedin, which actually also, you see that there's a trademark here. This is sold under the trade name Yondelis. So I'm going to talk about these two compounds, the last two things that I want to mention. So the first one has anti-tumor activity against solid tumors, and they are currently recruiting for a phase 1 study. Now, sometimes when you recruit for a study, the study winds up being terminated just because you can't find enough people that want to participate in the study, and you hope that that's not the case. But this, as I said, they actually are recruiting right now for this study, and Yondelis is actually on the market, but not in the United States yet. It's actually being marketed in Russia, and there may be some countries in Europe where this material can be prescribed as well. Now, it does have orphan drug status, and I think it's on the fast track because it seems to do something for metastasized ovarian cancers. And so in the United States, I don't know, I mean, it's just that our process for getting drug approval is very, very slow. So it probably will wind up being available in the United States as well. But again, it's an anti-cancer agent. So I just wanted to share some of these interesting kinds of compounds with you, show you that there's a variety of different kinds of chemistry, and this is just a small number of the things that have been isolated from marine organisms. And certainly this work will continue, I'm sure, for many, many years, and we'll see new things. And hopefully we'll see some really interesting compounds that will actually make it to the marketplace and will help alleviate pain and disease. So once again, standard format, 25 questions on the exam from the book and 8 from this little presentation. And I will see you again in a week. Thank you.